this week's episode of TalkStone.
Spoiler alert, we reveal who won the Fall Championship.
Special guest in studio, and I'm just saying he's qualified for the World Championship.
And as always, Dan, we present this week's well-played moment and a spicy meme history.
Everybody get in here, let's break down all the esports action. Welcome to TalkStone, your premier source for all things competitive Hearthstone news and analysis. My name's Frodan.
And I'm TJ.
And he's TJ. And this week we are back with another episode shortly after the Fall Championships for HCT, where we crowned a winner. We'll talk about that. We're going to go for group stages. And that's pretty much it, right? We basically have spent like the past couple weeks together, TJ, since we did the last episode, because we had all that week of preparation leading up to the Fall Championship.
I've seen you over the past 10 days more than I've seen my own son.
Well, I would like.
Are you
to
looking
think,
for a new father, Dan?
I would think, probably. I think your wife may be at least considering someone else for assistance. I was thinking, we were kind of like family, TJ. Us as casters, we're pretty much brothers at this point. But I clearly see where your allegiance lies. So I'm a little salty about that. I gotta say before we get started that this is probably my favorite season of HCT that I've worked on as a talent or caster. Yeah. Largely because we got to film really funny intros and just kind of make fun of each other and ourselves a lot. And, more importantly, just get to see Admiral dress up as a baby and act as a baby. So
that was the culmination.
Pretty much just watching Admiral.
Yeah, that was the culmination of the whole season, was basically seeing Admiral have to dress up and act like a baby. And I just want to point out that was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done in the 4 years I've worked on Hearthstone.
Emotionally or physically?
Both. Strapping Admiral to my chest, Baby Bjorn, and doing multiple takes.
Yeah.
Too many takes.
You're not necessarily like one to, be very physically active, right, TJ?
No, that's part of my persona, actually.
But that is quite the training regimen. Can you imagine having training weights in admirable sizes?
No,
like that's. I'm gonna strap on 2 admirals today.
What's funny about that? At first, they're like, would it be possible for you to like lift him up?
Yeah.
And
they were asking you to lean back and like
lift
get Admiral's feet off the ground.
Yeah, I was like, absolutely not. I get tired after about 30 minutes of holding my own son, and he's about 14 pounds now.
Yeah.
So we crowned ourselves a fall champion, Frodan.
Yep. Language hacker from Canada takes down Bloody Face from the USA in the finals. America's battle, USA versus Canada, a rivalry that's been around for a long time in terms of like who is the country on top in North America at least. And also, if you just look at the top 4 in itself, no European players. Is this the first season that we haven't had a European player booked your ticket to the World Championships via this global seasonal championship?
So we've only had 5 total seasons of championships in the new system. We had 3 last year and then 2 this year. And if we can go back, like Stanodachi won winter, Hoy won spring, and then summer of last year
was
we
orange versus
we had orange. So last year was good, and then last season had
it was like dominance,
3 Europeans. Yeah. And then this season, this is the first season. Of the new HCT system, this is the first season.
Wow. So what do you think happened there, TJ? I mean, I know we're supposed to go through groups and break things down, but I'm just going for the big headlines. America's domination, 3 of them going through, 2 from USA, justsaiyan, Bloody Face, and Language Hacker, who took it all. And then the 4th player was Blood Trail from Asia Pacific / Taiwan.
Well, we didn't have I suppose you could say as much star power from Europe this time. Sinto was probably the most well-known player, of course, being at the World Championship last year, and he was very close for qualifying back to back. So the other players, Hatul, he even said on Twitter this morning, he said, "Yeah, I brought weird decks, but I still agree with my choices. This is just not a meta that suits me," is what he said in his tweet. Earlier on, I think it was today, might have been yesterday. Renman, he had some crazy games, but ultimately fell at the end to the eventual champion.
Yeah, he got to the top 8 and was pretty close.
Yeah.
So that's a respectable effort.
And then Moyen was, he's kind of a newcomer. He's a really young guy, 18 years old. He actually turned 18 just a few weeks before he came to the Fall Championship. Right. So barely missed having to have an adult travel with him.
The amnesiac treatment, which think would be quite appropriate. I do want to point out, too, that this was probably a notch or two lower than the quality of play we've come to expect from Europe, because there's just been a lot of noticeable mistakes, and the players are the first to admit it, too.
Yep.
That there's like a lot of regrets, right? Like Moyen had a pretty series-defining error that probably could have changed the entire course of the series, and maybe even got himself to the top 8. And then who knows? It's like from there you could rewrite history. And then Renman also kind of had some shaky moments. He also had some brilliant moments too. It was very extreme on both sides. But that's what you kind of get when you bring a more complex lineup like he does with, crazy, greedy mill/combo druid of Malygos and Togwaggle or Cube Warlock.
Yeah. And that's just sort of his playstyle. And one of the things that I loved about this tournament in particular was that a lot of players leaned into their playstyle, which is not something we often see coming into championship events. Notably, like Hatul just bringing his control decks that he mid-ranges up. As he put it in one of his interviews on stage.
China has a reputation for playing aggro, so they brought aggro lineups except for Lion King. And then even then, he brought like a weird control priest lineup too, and control warlock. That's also very China-esque. And then justsaiyan has a reputation for winning. So he stuck to his play style of just winning.
Yeah. He did. That's right.
So Group A had Lion King versus Sintolol. Sintolol was able to take it 3-1, and I think this was fairly expected, given that Lion King's lineup has some pretty big holes. Control Warlock has a lot of question marks over it. Yes, Demonic Project can mess with combos, but more specifically, you start getting into the mind gaming aspect of championships because brackets and groups are released prior to deck lists being submitted. So Lion King was on record multiple times for saying that, Sento has a reputation for playing aggro. I'm just going to play anti-aggro lineup and maybe use that knowledge to gain a huge advantage in my group. Sento did no such thing because he was not thinking about aggro or even what lineup he was going to bring. He was exploring the depths of Azeroth in World of Warcraft for a majority of his time. And then when the week came of preparation that he scheduled with Moyen, he said, "Can I just use your lineup?" And Moyen's like, "Okay." And then Moyen changed one card to make it different.
Yeah. Well, Lion King should have been looking at Moyen to try and get a read for his group. And it actually was the same for playoffs.
Maybe
Sento just took Moyen's lineup, and they both qualified for playoffs using a very similar lineup. Again, they had one change there, but Sento's lineup was based off of Moyen, so kind of relying on him for preparation. So that was just a poor read on his part, and ended up being a poor read for the whole tournament because there was a lot of anti-control decks in the top 8, I guess you could say.
Right.
There was a lot of aggro lineups that fell in group stage.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Lion King's best strategy actually was to log on to World of Warcraft and befriend Sento, but not reveal his true identity. And then, kind of talk like, "Oh, are you Sento? What are you gonna play for championships?" And maybe run the long con.
Queue up for a raid, become his best friend.
Yeah. And then Lion King reveals himself as he was the tank DPS all along. The other side of the Group A was Bloodyface and Doc Rivius. Rivius was my pick, both as my champion and my prediction. Full disclosure, I really like Rivius, and I really wanted him to do well, but I also did not want to pick Saiyan because I, unfortunately, have come to the realization that every championship that I pick somebody, it usually does not go well. The only pick that's ever done okay was Colento in spring of last year, who ended up getting to the top 4.
Yeah, well, he was one prep away from not getting to the top 4 against RDU.
So he needed to Colento his situation out in order to avoid the Frodan touch of death. And so Rivius actually came up to me at the after party and was like, "You owe me a drink because you cursed me." He actually has heard about this reputation of mine. I said, "Well, unfortunately, I'm about to head out, but next time I go to Korea, like say there's HCT Korea in the future potentially or some other event, I'm going to take Rivius out, and then we're going to go karaokeing afterwards, and everyone's welcome to join me." Because I told the story last time. Rivius is one of the most fun people to go karaokeing with afterwards because you don't have to do anything. You'll actually just take the mic, and then 5 hours later, you're still listening to him yelling into the microphone.
He's also normally a fun player to watch play Hearthstone, too.
Yes, sorry. We're talking about Hearthstone. And,
well, see, Rivius I was disappointed by Rivius' performance for a couple of reasons. One, he didn't bring
a Rivius lineup.
The wacky lineups that Rivius is known for. I said earlier, a lot of players went with their own style. Rivius did not. He brought bought a pretty normal lineup style. And honestly, at least in the first match that he played against Bloodyface, I don't think he played that well.
I don't think he played a second series that well against Lion King.
Yeah, it was just it was kind of a rough tournament overall for Rivius, and he did end up making to the decider match of his group.
Yeah, he was one game away from going to top 8 in the end, despite having like a pretty middling performance by his standards. And the reason why we are being a little bit harsh here on Rivius is because he's one of the point leaders for Asia Pacific. Needs to be able to pick up that level of play. And the same actually applies for some other people, which we'll talk about too. But taking a second to recognize Bloodyface and how well he did in this group specifically. Day 1, starting off with Group A's play with Bloodyface, was quite possibly already the peak of human performance. You might not like it, TJ. But Bloodyface's Og Rogue play was fantastic.
It was.
And I think a lot of players were recognizing it on social media too. And I think that's always really nice when you feel great about your play, the casters feel great about your play, the fans do, but also your peers.
Yeah.
When the other players are like, man, game recognizes game.
Yeah, the only deck that we had questions about, and these questions were kind of debunked as I'll get into, his Zoo Warlock play, Admirable thinks that there was just tons of turns where he missed face damage. And there was a couple of Zoo games that Admirable thinks Bloodyface could have won.
Why are you like distinctly pointing this out to like the casters?
Because it's funny because
you're trying to like separate yourself from this duo?
No.
Trouble in Paradise?
I will always side with Admirable, because we've been casting together for a long time now. He's my casting partner. But Zoo Warlock specifically is the deck where I think all of our Admirable memes like come out in full force.
Right, because Doomguard from hand.
Doomguard from hand.
Go face always.
Go face always. Those kinds of things.
Right.
And there was a lot of turns where Bloodyface would trade a minion, miss 3 damage, then next turn trade another minion, miss 2 damage, and not play Doomguard right when he gets it, draws into his hand on turn 5, those types of things. But we both went up to Bloodyface after every single one of his series, and Admirable made his spiel and said, why'd you do this? Why didn't you push this face damage? You're playing a burn deck. Why didn't you play the Doomguard from hand? And he perfectly justified every single one of his plays and perfectly remembered the situations that he was in those moments. So being able to recall those moments and know that you made the right play, even if you lost, is a tough thing to do. And we know that he was reviewing his plays because he had mentioned multiple times that one of his main practice partners was Noblord. And I've probably watched Noblord review 50 tournaments or matches at this stage. He's always right in there. So when you have him as a practice partner and a guy to help have that second opinion on reviewing your matches after a tournament, then you're going to make sure that you can justify every play that you make. And Bloodyface could. And I honestly think that he played exceptionally and was rewarded with a second-place finish because of it.
In hindsight, it makes us silly to think that he wasn't one of the better players in this group. And when he came out on top, I think it was rightfully so.
Yeah.
Group B was justsaiyan versus Akumaker, which is unfortunately Battle of Friends, kind of like a Yugi versus Joey moment, if you will. Saiyan, of course, being Yugi because he always wins. Aku because he has a weird Brooklyn accent. Moyen versus Taimyao on the other side of the bracket. And Moyen was able to beat Taimyao. And then justsaiyan took out Akumaker. justsaiyan advanced in first place with Moyen getting absolutely steamrolled. This is actually a quick fact here. The series between Moyen and Saiyan was so one-sided and quick. It was 18 minutes. And that's the fastest best of 5 in HCT history. That's how much of a blowout it was. Saiyan crushed him in record time.
Moyen didn't get to play Hearthstone.
we actually, and this, he can come and defend himself later.
He's here
because justsaiyan's our group. Oh, sorry, our guest. But the way we summarize justsaiyan's weekend is either he got to play Hearthstone or his opponent didn't get to play Hearthstone.
Yeah.
So it was some pretty crazy draws from Saiyan, but I mean that's kind of what the deck does. That's why you play certain powerful tier 1 lineups, because sometimes they just win. That being said, what else is some of the other headlines or stories that stick out to you from Group B?
I think my favorite thing was Group B was seeing the evolution of Taimyao, especially after the initial matches, seeing all the Chinese players in the elimination matches for their groups was a pretty tough blow to morale for the Chinese players and any fans of Chinese players. But Taimyao really just made a pretty big comeback, and I think he played really well. I think he played the best out of the 4 Chinese representatives there, and all of his series were close. In his group stage, he had 3 3-2s to make it out. A loss in his initial, and then wins in his elimination and decider matches. And I think that was just cool to watch because I was honestly rooting for him. I was saying to myself, he's the last hope. I hope that we get a Chinese representative at least to the top 8 and hopefully to Worlds. But I was honestly, since he was the player I knew the least about out of the Chinese players going in, except for the fact that when we had his player interview, I loved him immediately because he sat down in the chair and he just relaxed and just started patting his belly as we asked him questions. He started rubbing and patting his belly. All of his answers were about food and cooking, and he's my spirit animal.
So when Timeout came in for the player interview, he came in holding his belly.
Yes.
And, we're not going to beat around the bush. Timeout's kind of a bigger dude. But he also has, like, a big smile. So he just kept walking around the interview room and sitting down, smiling and holding his belly.
Yeah.
Like he was primed in his 3rd trimester or something, Kind of like, this is a special part of my life.
That's exactly what I do whenever I walk into a room. Like, I just instantly connected with him. And then I asked him if he had cooked me a meal because he says one of his biggest hobbies is cooking. And we also asked him, like, who he enjoys cooking for. And his answer was himself.
It's great. And, every answer, he would always, like, take time to pause and look at us individually and smile while I was holding. He would hold his tummy, smile.
Smile.
Take time to nod to each one of us and answer food-related questions. Or rather, not even related questions. It was just questions that ended up turning into food discussions.
Yeah.
This guy is awesome. And also I got a chance to chat with him right after the event ended. And I was practicing my Chinese a little bit. Not very great. But he said, you know what, just speak English. I think I can understand most of it.
He bamboozled us.
Yeah, he actually was speaking in Chinese at first. And then he was like, I actually understand everything you're saying.
Yes.
It was actually nice of him to let us know that so that way we don't say anything.
But he didn't let us know that during his entire player interviews. For
the
first 3 days that we were there for the championship, he had the translator with him at all times. He didn't say a word of English. He didn't acknowledge that he could understand us when we spoke in English. He let the translator translate. Then he answered in Chinese, the normal process. And then the one time that he did, Sato went outside and he was trying to, like, mime to him for some reason to ask him a question because the translator wasn't with him. They were just outside together. And he just responded to him completely in English. And Sato's mind was blown. And he came back in and told me, and from that point on, we knew he was bamboozling us. So he even spoke Chinese in his winners interviews, didn't give any hint that he spoke English, but, man.
He was really sad, actually, when the championship ended. And rightfully so, because the sting of defeat was still very fresh because he played in the top 8 that day.
Mm-hmm.
The other Chinese players already had made, their peace with what happened. Trunks and Island Cat, they were all kind of like talking and joking and like memeing their pictures on stage. And Timeout was just kind of like a little bit flat. And then I asked him, and I told him, like, hey, I think a lot of us agree that you played probably the best out of China this weekend. You should be proud of yourself, and you put up a heck of a fight. And he turned to me and said, "I'll be back." And then he walked away. And I was like, wow, that's kind of badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was probably my favorite part about Group B. We've not seen the last of Moyen. Not a child prodigy, so to speak, like we touted about Amnesiac or George C. or any other.
Hunter Ace? Isn't Hunter Ace like 18?
Is he?
Around there, yeah.
Around 18? Yeah.
Shan gave that he knows. He's been tracking.
But definitely a player we'll see more of.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think European players that are really young and hungry is a recipe for success. So good luck to Moy in the future. Group C had returning Taiwanese player Blood Trail, who ended up crushing this championship until he made a hard stop in the semifinals. But that's okay, because Blood Trail was already chilling because he wore sunglasses in the top 4. He was just like, yeah, I'm back to, Blood Trail of old.
I think he just did it because he was annoyed that people kept asking him. I'm pretty
about
sure.
The sunglasses?
Like, Cora asked him on stage. We asked him a bunch, hey, when are you going to put on the sunglasses? When are you going to put on the sunglasses? Hey, you won. You going to put on the sunglasses now?
Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and throw this out here. I think Blood Trail is the second coming of Pavel. Because this guy comes onto the big stage, and his first real appearance that people pay attention to, it was disastrous on every account, and he knows that. And then instead of like, using that as a way to just say, you know what, let's just not, I'm too embarrassed, I don't want to come back. He doubles down. He qualifies again, then very next season, which is something very like Pavel would do, and then crushes everybody. And he also does his own little weird stuff, like a couple of cards or a couple of tech choices or a couple of decks in his lineup are just like, okay, it's a little unusual, but nothing too revolutionary. And then he also like does the sunglasses thing. He's also kind of like ice cold, and you're not really sure what he reads because he doesn't really have very many expressive faces when he plays. And then also like the way he just deadpans all his answers is so interesting to me. This guy really reminds me of him in almost every way.
Yeah.
But from the storyline. And, I don't want to make him feel like he's overshadowed by Pavel because Pavel has this crazy win streak. I mean, he has one of the most dominant streaks in Hearthstone history along with all the people we talked about in 2018. But I have high hopes for this kid. And I think because, Taiwan has Tom and kind of that big source of inspiration, and he makes, things that Tom does now makes national news because of how he's been recognized in Hearthstone. And I really look forward for Blood Trail to rise up too because I think, you saw the Taiwanese representation really take a big jump because of that. Like, a lot of people on stream were watching Blood Trail's match when he qualified. They, again, went nuts. They were like, they wanted something to cheer for again. So I'm really happy for the kid. I think he played pretty well. And I think a lot of people don't question whether or not he belongs in the World Championship, especially 2 seasons back-to-back, the dominant performance that he had, especially in fall.
Yeah, and especially with Death Row Hunter, which is the
yes,
deck
he cleared it up. He's like, yeah, I'll play Death Row Hunter again and prove it to you guys.
Yeah, and I was noting all the moments that he didn't play Stitch Tracker on turn 3.
He knows.
He knows. But other players in that group, Language Hacker, which he went on to win the thing.
Right.
Lost his first match against Blood Trail, and he didn't really think that he played that well, and he said he kind of lost his confidence. He played way too kind of safe and passive, and he got a lot of words of wisdom from some of his friends, some of his practice partners, and basically just told him to just play like he would at home. And I think Admirable told him, like, try and separate yourself from the game and play like you are watching somebody else play and the things that you would recommend that they do. And I think that was kind of an eye-opening experience for him, where separating yourself from the big stage and separating yourself from this high-stakes event really helped him out and gave him his confidence back.
Mm-hmm.
And may not have seemed like it in his interviews because such a calm, polite Canadian fellow.
He is.
But he actually just did have like kind of more swagger about his play and about his just his personality in the last few days once he started to get some wins under his belt.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it too. Day 2's play featuring groups C and D was just not the level of day 1. Mm-hmm. And Language Hacker was part of that. But, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got when I was competing in Hearthstone, and I still do once in a while dabble in, like, enter a tour stop here and there, is to zoom out. Just, like, stop focusing so much on who you're playing, per se, unless you have a specific read on what they're doing because you got insight into their mind. Stop worrying too much about all these, like, specific micro plays that can cost you. Like, think about the big picture. What's this 1% or one play or, like, one card that you really need to be able to execute on and figure it out. And I think Language Hack was getting in his own head. And I think that's kind of the case, too, with guys like Trunks, because I feel like Trunks making his 3rd championship appearance is notable, but I feel like his performances on the world stage have still been rather lacking in terms of what we've come to expect. He's one of the most well-accomplished players. He's kind of like up there with Omega Zero and Jason Zone now because he's made his 3rd championship appearance. And yet, despite that, I feel like Trunks has just been disappointing a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can't figure out why.
It's tough. We look at his lineup, and sometimes we'll say, okay, he's got good decks. He's got an okay lineup for his group, and then he gets up there and he just loses in groups. If he wins a match, he loses in deciders. We haven't seen him make it to those quarterfinals yet. Haven't even seen him close to qualifying to a world championship. And I kind of share the same sentiment. It's hard to see why. Because even if you look at his plays, he may make like 1 or 2 missteps there. But then some plays, it looks like he's playing brilliantly. Like we scrutinize plays very heavily backstage as casters. And
And
sometimes
on stage, we scrutinize them just, moderately.
but it's kind of true. And sometimes we even make like knee-jerk reactions when we're backstage because we're not in front of a camera.
I wish the best for this guy. I think he's really wholesome. And in fact, I think he's really funny. Trunks told us that his main goal in this championship was to place Saiyan in the finals. And for their pre-final ceremony, he was going to ask Saiyan to power up with him and yell on stage. And it was going to be like this entire crazy role player scenario where both of them and the entire arena would get up and yell with him, and it'd be like this crazy uprising.
Our production team was
on
board.
The Saiyan race.
Yeah,
and the production team was like totally on board for it. Saiyan didn't even know about this probably because we didn't tell him.
Well, Trunks didn't make it past.
Trunks didn't make it past the group stages,
so we didn't even.
He couldn't even build his time machine to go to the past. TJ.
Yeah,
that's
we missed
a little
out.
nugget for all you Dragon Ball heads.
Yeah,
and then the last person is Hatul. We're running a little bit long, so let's finish up quickly. Hatul has a very weird lineup, and we'll feature probably one of his decks later in this episode to try to talk about it. But man, does this guy have character? He is one of the most interesting people to be on camera in quite some time. And part of the Hearthstone community and its charm is the fact that everyone kind of gets welcomed in. Like if you just kind of prove yourself and keep your head down and not try to talk too big and puff your chest a little too much, then you'll earn the respect and the camaraderie of your peers. Like you'll be welcomed in, people practice with you, people ask your opinions, they'll hang out, they'll always, go get ice cream if you lose. That's just kind of the trend these days with Hearthstone players. But Hatul kind of just threw caution to the wind and said, you know what, I'm just gonna, play it up for the camera. Yeah. And this guy was like refusing questions. He was like dunking other pro player opinions on camera, like calling them net deckers and like, what is this guy doing? Like he is chaotic neutral, I guess.
He was making waves.
I loved it. It was so fun and refreshing. Probably at the expense of like Cora sometimes because I felt it was like, man, she has to like try to rebound off of him. But man, he is really fun to have at a championship. And when I was hanging out with him, I was like, man, I really hope I see you back because I think this was definitely an event to remember because of you.
Hearthstone needs somebody to make waves, I think, is some of the biggest
Amnesiac's gotten soft.
Yes.
He's gotten soft. He's been
has.
kind of like, mushy because of the team dynamic. Like now he's playing for more than himself. I saw him hug like Saiyan after a match one time at HCT Oakland. I'm like, oh, Amnesiac. Yeah, that's not young savage. He's young lover now.
Where's the reckless kid we learned to love?
Yeah, tweet first, think second. That used to be Amnesiac.
Yeah, that used to be his motto. And now it's like ask everybody first and then tweet. No. But yeah, Hatul, and he's not even different off camera. He's not even like just playing up the fact that he's on camera.
I know.
He walked into our caster interview. We interview all the players, as we mentioned a few times on episodes. And he walked in, and immediately we knew that we weren't going to be the ones asking questions.
Yeah, he was contending with me about fashion stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's the very first thing we talked about. I was like, hey, man, you look good. What's the inspiration? He's like, why not? And he looked at me directly for like a minute without breaking eye contact. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm asking that question. He's like,
yeah. You even complimented him.
I know.
And say, like, a lot of players just come up there in, like, raggedy old shirts and like, basketball shorts. And, I want to, compliment you on actually dressing up. And he was
like fighting me.
He just straight up said, he said.
And I'm like, dude, I agree with you.
That's just my clothes. But he was a character, and his decks also showed his character. Mid-ranging up some control lineups, which ultimately didn't work out. The priest deck, I thought, even if he had played it perfectly, I still think he probably would have struggled. And he didn't play it perfectly. Even he tweeted out some mistakes that he made in one of the priest matches that we criticized the most. Didn't make it. But Hatul's still going to be organizing fireside gatherings, tournaments, community events in Israel. He's a outstanding member of his community for doing that. And he's got experience. He showed us like spreadsheets and databases that he's created for his local tournament scene.
Yeah.
Like he's got more data on the players that play in his tournaments than we do on Hearthstone players. And we have a lot. So it's just goes to show you how much passion he has.
It might sound like we're kind of making fun of the guy, but I actually have nothing but respect for him because he also talks big but also delivers. He's acting on behalf of his community, trying to organize stuff. And a lot of people will say a bunch of stuff to kind of rile people up, but in the end kind of retreat back to their own safety net. Hatul constantly puts himself out there, organizes stuff at Israel fireside gatherings and local tournaments. And I gotta love that, very holistic approach. And he's also going to be sticking around in America. He's going to be competing in the tour stop and maybe show up to BlizzCon, so I look forward to hanging out with him there.
Yeah.
Group D. We have Redmen versus Island Cat. Island Cat, one of my favorite players to interview ever from anywhere. Mm-hmm. He's just really cool. He's a lot like us. He's a caster, a streamer, a player. I mean, actually, if anything, he's a lot like Brian Gibbler.
Well,
he just kind of does it all.
I actually compared him to you on stream because I cast one of his matches, and I said watching Island Cat play in HCT would be like if Frodan qualified for a championship and made it all the way because he also does like a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, which Gibbler doesn't have time for with his stream schedule. So he's like a little bit of everything.
Hey, Gibbler in 2014 said he was going to organize a tournament, and he's still planning it.
He's still planning
It's going to be epic.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Shiro will be involved in some capacity.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, Island Cat's one of the coolest cats around. Really sweet dude, but he kind of got bodied in groups. He won one game, went 1-6. Redmen cleaned house. And what's interesting about this specific setup is that Redmen probably had one of the hardest matchups initially in this entire group stage because of how greedy his lineup was and how Island Cat brought an aggro lineup.
A true aggro lineup. Well, not completely true, but the truest of aggro lineups in the field, I suppose.
It was 3 aggro decks plus Malagos Druid, and this is so that you can beat other aggro lineups. You have a little edge over them.
Yeah.
Just kind of got dumpstered there, unfortunately. Tyler versus Tincho. Another matchup where I thought, would go towards the aggro lineup. Tincho probably has the closest to true aggro in his lineup because he has Token Druid instead. And, once again, the slower lineup able to win, but Tyler won 3-0 over Tincho, which was also surprising. So Group D was a group of upsets in my book based off some of the spreadsheets that I was making. I thought Tincho would make it out pretty easily of this group, but ends up falling to Tyler and Deciders. And, Tyler able to make it to the top 8. So what do you think about Group D overall?
Group D was the one that I actually had the hardest time reading because it was a fast group. And when you try and make like reads or projections based off of like expected matchups, one initial match loss completely ruins that. Because it completely ruins
the matchups
the matchups and the dynamic of the group. So as soon as Island Cat lost to Redmen, everything I knew about that group was completely shattered. I'm glad that Redmen was one of the players that made it out of Group D just because I used to not like watching Q Block when it was dominant. Before the changes to Possess Lackey or Dark Pack.
You complained about it on Twitter. You're like, we get it. You made top 10 Legend ladder
with Q Block. Warlock. And I don't do that. I don't make edgy tweets like that. I was just so...
Which are your opinions, of course, and not reflecting of your player.
Exactly. I don't even know if I even worked for Blizzard at that time. I may have. But still, like even like Raza Priest, I held back quite a bit. Even though, that meta was one of the hardest to cast. Raza Priest Mirror, specifically, that mirror was the hardest thing to cast in the world because there was nothing to talk about outside of, will he draw Raza Priest or Anduin next turn? Nope. Back to square one. And now it's become one of my favorite decks to watch, especially in the current meta because there's crazy stuff that you can do with that deck, as we've seen, and as we'll talk about a little bit later on with one of Redmen's matches specifically.
What a weird time, right? When Redmen and Q Block becomes one of the more interesting decks to watch. Not necessarily because of anything Redmen, but just because of how prevalent Q Block was a few months ago. To the point where it had to get nerfed during the Witchwood expansion. And now it's kind of nostalgic. And to add to that, I mean, people were talking about for this championship how close they were to bringing Even Paladin. That's another deck that was absurdly strong that had to get nerfed because of Call to Arms. And then people are like, wow, that's actually cool. I think it goes to show you that the meta still does evolve. And I think a lot of the player sentiment was if we had another week, the lineups might be even completely different for a lot of these players. Just because they had preparation. And then, of course, with the changes that's announced for Giggly Inventor and Mana Worm, who knows? That maybe make all the Chinese players stop playing the Aggro Mage. So, all these different changes are what really makes the tournaments really compelling. And I love that Renmen, Hatul, and some of these other guys, all stuck to their guns, and when it succeeds for them, it's a bonus.
Yeah, and I think one of the last players we haven't talked about in Group D, Tyler. The funniest thing about watching Tyler play was, for some reason, we make the caster rotation in advance. So we know the initial matches, but after that we don't really know. It seemed like Sottle was casting every single one of Tyler's matches, and of course their teammates on Complexity. And he was hating it because, one, as casters, we're not supposed to show bias, at least in a large scale. And
he doesn't even hide it at this point. He says, I am 100% biased. He prefaces all of his casts with that.
Because he knows that his cast is going to suffer if he doesn't show it. But it's still funny. Like, whenever Tyler makes a pretty obvious blunder, like the turn where he Alex Raza after he naturalized and missed damage instead of setting up an almost guaranteed lethal, Sottle will normally drive home misplays. If there's an obvious misplay, you can't hide from Sottle. He's gonna train for it. But it's in that one he's like, probably a slight misplay was like his words in that instance. I was like, oh geez, Sottle, come on.
No, it's because on the last day he dressed up all fancy in his little fox jacket or whatever, his tiger jacket rather. So it's kind of the spirit of Frodan came down where he's not as harsh on people.
Yeah, that's
as Sottle used.
That's what it was.
That's what it was, TJ.
And then he went to Tyler after that match, and Tyler hadn't even realized that was a misplay. He didn't even know.
That's not good.
Yeah, he didn't.
He must have gone in at that point.
Yeah, he was so tuned in on like a separate kind of win condition. So tuned in on just, depriving him of all of his resources and winning by that way, that he hadn't even realized that fatigue damage was ticking and that he misplayed until after. He still won that game, but maybe he could have been closer. I don't know. I don't remember the exact board state. I just remember those specific moments. But Tyler, really, really wholesome guy, and still in the race for point standings at the end of the season for Asia Pacific. Along with Rivius and Shaxi, I think, are the three players that are going to be coming down to the wire.
Well, another player that was in contention, too, was Blood Trail, but he actually qualified.
He did.
So there's a lot on the line for these APAC players. Tyler and Rivius and Blood Trail were all indirectly rooting for the other person, too.
Yes.
Until Blood Trail had to play Tyler. And we kind of mentioned how Redmond taking a win changed the course of this entire direction of this group. Had Tyler matched up against Island Cat, who beat Redmond based off lineup advantage, he'd be playing against Language Hacker, and because Tyler has like that quest rogue and Language Hacker didn't, he would have that edge in the control mirror. And who knows, maybe he goes through and then Blood Trail has to beat Redmen instead. And then it's just like this really interesting like how it could have all pieced together. But the one takeaway is that APAC's last call just got really interesting again. Because part of it was Saiyan qualifying, and we're gonna have Saiyan on in just a few minutes. But it's just, it makes it a little bit like less intense for the Americas last call because Muzzy once again is really far ahead of everyone else. I mean, maybe Monsanto can catch him, but APAC is so neck and neck. It's like 1 point difference.
Yes.
So every single tour stop finish between top 32 and top 16 matters. Every single ladder finish matters.
For the Americas, as you mentioned, if you asked a lot of players who even follow pretty closely the competitive scene, who's in third place in points in the Americas? Not many people would be able to pinpoint it, honestly.
Season 3, Just Saying number 1, Muzzy number 2, Monsanto number 3, but Muzzy and Monsanto are tied at 42 points apiece. Amnesiac at number 4, and Sohyun at number 5. And these are all players that all were in contention for the top 10 power rankings that we were talking about last week, as well as Invent and a few other sites. It's going to be a tight race and a photo finish for some of these regions. I think Europe tends to be a runaway case with Hunter Race. Mm-hmm. But we still have a couple of months and a couple more tour stops, TJ.
And we still have another playoffs and championships. Hunter Race still
That's true.
could
That's
qualify.
Yeah, and then open it up for Fino and everyone else below him.
Yeah.
The reason why we hype up the points leader so much is because the past couple years, when it was called the last call spot, that's been our world champion. Pavel won the 8-man over RDU and Sinto and a few of these other really great players, and became our 2016 world champion and continued to cement his legacy. And then 2017, Tom 60229 barely missed out on the summer championship in the top 8, I believe against Purple, and then went on to go through points to world championship and then became our world champion. So very realistically, whoever goes through our top points earners as Hunter Ace and currently Muzzy and currently Tyler is going to be the person that will become the world champion based off the current trend.
And based off the current trends, we've had one from Europe, one from Asia Pacific. So this year, the points leader from either the Americas or China will win the world championship.
Okay. Well, Tyler's kind of an interesting case because he technically has come from the Europe region, so it's kind of like Europe took Apex points leader spot.
He's full Asia Pacific now, Dan.
I know, but like it's kind of interesting because he spent a portion of the year playing in Europe.
Sure.
And so has a few other players. Like
he even played for the Netherlands HGG team.
That's right. Isn't that kind of interesting?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that being said, Champs, to close out this discussion, was a really fun time. My favorite season to broadcast. Love the cold opens. Love the storylines. Great games, intense moments, and really wholesome ending, too. Largely because we don't, as much as I like to make fun of Europe whenever they don't have the results, they are just so good. The player base is fantastic, incredible depth, and great minds for the game. But, it's really fun to take down the top dog in Hearthstone. So for one season, we get to say, stay free, EU.
Amen.
Are we allowed to make that on the broadcast?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. And now it's time for meme history.
And Dan, I just want to say that the meme this week is spicy.
Caliente.
This week's meme history
It's a good one.
Is fun and interactive.
Fun Interactive was a meme that was first created by the blog post for the upcoming balance changes for September 22nd, 2014.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. This is actual meme history.
Yes, it is.
Before, we were kind of like picking stuff that happened like 4 months ago. But now this one actually dives into one of the original ones that was created by Zariah, the community manager for Hearthstone, posted a paragraph that will live in infamy, which was, Leroy Jenkins now costs 5 mana up from 4, and also Starving Buzzard costs 5 up from 2. Leroy Jenkins created a strategy that revolved around trying to defeat your opponent in one turn without requiring any cards on the board. Fighting for board control and battles between minions make an overall game of Hearthstone more fun and compelling, but taking 20 plus damage in one turn is not particularly fun or interactive. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. In this context, you think about Malagos today. You think about, the crazy stuff from Raza Priest, or even just currently Control Priest with Mind Blast can hit over 22. Very crazy combos. But this is a different time in Hearthstone when there was not as many tools. Like, the best way to stop those combos was like Lotheb. And there's not like, Demonic Project or the Dirty Rats in the past, etc. So, a lot of times people would think about these non-interactive decks, and that was the main complaint about it against Freeze Mage, against all these other combo decks with Miracle Rogue or Warlock, like Combo Warlock with Power Overwhelming. And so when this post was created about like why they nerfed Leroy Jenkins, they took this one phrase, not particularly fun or interactive, or just fun interactive, and they applied it to everything that they just didn't like about a specific deck or card.
The rest of eternity.
Yeah,
until today.
Everything was like tagged as fun and interactive. So whenever you lost to like the aggro mage top deck fireball, I was like, wow, that was very fun and interactive. Or my opponent cleared the board with like, Unleash the Hounds, fun and interactive. Just one of these really interesting like phrases that gets completely taken out of context, but by itself as a meme, you kind of like hear its sarcasm and biting tone. You're like, wow, it kind of applies to everything. It's like the Giles theme of Hearthstone memes.
Yes. And I'm surprised.
That rhymes too, TJ.
It does. And I'm surprised it took us this long to get with this one. And, a lot of people may think, wow, Frodan and TJ, this is an edgy meme. But it's honestly not. People throw it around a lot. And it's our job as meme historians to educate
connoisseurs.
Yes, to educate the general public on these memes that they're just throwing around willy-nilly.
Right. And it's mostly applied to big combos that like take a long time. So like one example of a modern day fun and interactive meme or application of this is the Shutterwalk situation, where Shutterwalk actually does have a lot of ways to interact with their combo. You can try to manipulate their board state and maybe stall out stuff, or mill their Shutterwalk even. Who knows? I think somebody might know a thing or two about that coming up soon. But when the animations take, like a solid minute to finish out all the life drinkers and all the summons and the balance effects, that's when people can bust out the old fun interactive, or like a twig combo with Malagos Druid, because it does take a long time to execute everything when they have 20 mana.
Yeah. But we just, wanted to kind of bring this meme up because it really is an old one dating back to 2014. And for those of you who are new to the Hearthstone community and see this thrown around in Twitch chat and wondering, where it originated from and why you're just throwing this phrase around, this is why. And Dan, we hope this edition of Meme History helped make the Hearthstone community a more inclusive place for us all. We're going to have Stan in the studio in a minute, and in honor of the Hearthstone Global Games Finals coming up, let's cheer.
Welcome back to the Hearthstone Global Games. New for the second season, we're proud to introduce HGG Cheer. Cheering is a way to show support for players and regions while boosting your presence in chat using bits, a virtual good you can buy on Twitch. Along the way, you'll unlock Hearthstone packs, new Twitch emotes, and a unique card back, while the players earn a share of the revenue. We'll see you in the tavern.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Stone of All Talks. We have justsaiyan in studio, fresh off of his incredible 3-month dominant performance. Has it been 3 months, Shan? Just, winning everything, ever?
I think it's been not nearly even like 2 months yet.
So
right?
4 months.
Four.
It's been about a year.
Shan, what's it like to have never lost a game of Hearthstone ever? Except for the semifinals.
Well, yeah, we just don't talk about that one, right? It's been kind of an incredible journey, and I think a lot of it is just like due to my teammates like helping me out and making sure that we're like, I think in this moment we're just kind of like one step ahead of the meta. Like almost every time we do well, a lot of people react to that, but we're thinking about how they're going to react, and then we just go a little bit further. So that's kind of the secret to the recent success, I think.
Oh, no. You go a little bit even further beyond. Come on, Sam. This is your brand. God.
I just want to
Do I have to get back on Tempo Storm just to coach him on that?
I just want to say
I could use a little bit of coaching on that, yeah.
Sorry,
my
TJ.
time to shine.
We're just talking over you. So
I'll just
funny
let you
story.
guys have your here. I'll just sit back. Have fun, enjoy.
For people who think that this has just kind of been a breakout year for saying like they never heard of him before that, I remember in 2015 when I was playing in tournaments and I actually had some reasonable success. It was because Saiyan was helping me out with lineups. The whole Pog Champ or Bog Champ Shaman. That was actually just Saiyan like feeding me the deck list essentially. So this guy has been a leader in behind the scenes for quite some time, and that was 3 years ago. A lot of people still credit me with that, but I'll be the first person to say that it was justsaiyan that helped me with that. So just to give you context of like how good this guy's been for a couple of years. He can't hear me right now, so he's.
And Saiyan can attest. I was a crucial practice partner for him because I am in the Discord with all the Tempo Storm guys, and I contribute all the time, right?
Oh
Saiyan?
yeah, and Saiyan will also tell you that I am his best man at his wedding.
How is emoji reactions? That's contributing.
That's pretty much all I do. Or sometimes they'll ask me questions. They'll say, "Hey TJ, can you give us any insider information on what's happening?" And I say, "Nope," and they go, "Okay," and then that's my contribution for the month. But yeah, it's sometimes I'll hop in there like voice channel, even when I'm at work. I lurk in there and listen to them. So even I have insider information into their work
that you don't share with anyone else.
That I don't share with anyone else. No.
Okay.
But it's cool. It helps me. Saiyan's helped me become a better caster indirectly. Even Watchstone. Why don't you Watchstone anymore?
Not enough time.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Plus,
he's too busy traveling and winning.
Yeah.
I think Fino's kind of taking over a little bit as well.
True.
He's kind of picked up where I left off, and he's doing a lot of stuff there, like
So
with the show matches and everything.
In 2 years, Fino's going to go to the World Championship. Because you're doing Watchstone a lot, like last year and the year before that.
It's a little rite of passage.
Yeah. He's inherited, the Saiyan's Night Watch, if you will. All right, so enough joking around and kind of talking about anecdotes here. So you mentioned how you guys feel like you're one step ahead of the men. Now, I'm not going to ask you to spill the trade secrets because I feel like you'd lose your edge there. But can you describe to me the preparation process for a player of your caliber, Stan?
Well, the thing is, after we play a lineup, we get a lot of practice with it because going through all the Swiss rounds, making it through top 16, things like that, you get to play a lot of matchups that you won't even see on ladder. So one of the things, for example, we learned after the fall playoffs was that Secret Hunter, the deck that we brought that did well for me, actually didn't feel that strong. So the big shift we were expecting is like, people might catch on to that a little bit as well, and then they kind of realized that Quest Rogue, like we saw in the playoffs, was just destroying Secret Hunter, I think. Secret Hunter against Quest Rogue went like 3-9 in favor of Quest Rogue. So a lot of people reacted and started playing Tempo Mage in their aggressive lineups instead of the Secret Hunter. So for WSG, I opted out to just not play Quest Rogue. So that's just kind of being a little bit ahead of their
that makes sense.
And understanding what people are thinking in the space.
That's really sharp insight, and I think a lot of people have basically elevated their respect for Tempo Storm. In the past, it kind of was just like a team of streamers and memers with, Reynad, Trump, etc., like Wreckful.
You guys don't remember that one DreamHack?
Yeah, actually in Austin, where Trump and Reynad make top 4. And then, and then Amnesiac was also part of the top as well. So it's like really funny to see all.
That was
these
the
people.
only DreamHack I've ever cast. Was that one right? That was the Austin, and Trump was part of Temple Storm.
He still is.
Oh, he still is.
But
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
not in the competitive lineup.
Not in the It's more
back
of a
then. He
content
was on the competitive lineup.
All things considering, though, you kind of credit your teammates, and I think a lot of people are focusing on you and Muzzy a lot. Let's talk a little bit about Amnesiac as well. He's kind of on his own island because he also is in the process of applying for college, and
it's a very busy time.
Yeah, very very important development age as well for him. What's it like working with him? Because it feels like you and Muzzy have been traveling a lot to all these tour stops, and Amnesiac joins once in a while, and he still does fairly well. But how's that dynamic work? Because we see like F2K for example, they go everywhere together. So there's like Nordovan and all these other teams.
Yeah, you could say Muzzy and I are kind of like life partners at this point, and then Amnesiac is a close relative, I guess. So the thing is like Amnesiac is great at expressing his thoughts, like more so than myself and Muzzy. So if you see us in a practice group, Amnesiac is more or less the one with the strongest opinion. And Muzzy and I like to give critique back and forth, but Amnesiac is good at leading conversations when we're prepping for a tournament.
Interesting. How much was he able to help you for the Fall Championships this time around?
So Fall Championships, I missed Amnesiac a little bit just because it is a really very trying time for him as well. Mm-hmm. And he's got all the applications and essays and things like that for college. But I remember as soon as I qualified through playoffs, Amnesiac was like one of the first ones to greet me and congratulate me and already get me focused to start working towards prepping for the championships. And I think he kind of helped me set up a timetable for that as well. But outside of that, he was very busy himself. So a lot of the testing and refining things I fell more towards Muzzy for.
I'm going to borrow an expression from TJ here. I think most people have seen you always be very calm, but never exclaim.
I've never heard you yell.
Yeah.
Ever.
And even being on the big stage at Blizzard Arena in front of the crowd, playing for the highest stakes yet of your career. Obviously, the World Championship is going to come up, so that'll be elevated. It seemed like another day in the office for you. Is that kind of what was going on, or perhaps were you masking it and there's a lot more nerves than was let on the surface?
I think the championship series this weekend was the most nervous I've been in a while.
Against Sinto?
Yeah, against Tincho, definitely. I felt heart beating out of my chest again. And then it's not that hard to stay focused after I've practiced it for a while and making it to a few finals before, but Blizzard Arena was just like a whole nother level because you could see the audience out of the corner of your eye. You could see like the cameras are everywhere and the lights are flashing and bright, and it just kind of takes you back to reality.
Right.
Zoning in means like I'm just looking at the game and nothing else. But when your opponent's right across from you and you can kind of tell that they're glancing here and there, trying to get a read and just everything going on.
Yeah,
he gives like a sly smile.
I don't know, man. I feel like with every single successive burn, just like there's not much of a man left for Sinto to evoke those emotions. Just when you burned his Gul'dan in top 8, or when he lost his Grumble or /Shutterwalk in the group stages, it was just like less and less of a reaction that we've come to expect. I feel like Sinto's a shell of a man at this point.
Oh, yeah. He barely even had a reaction at that point. And, yeah, we had the media piece.
You got to give some credit to Tincho, right?
Yeah,
I think other people, when these kind of things happen, it's hard for them to live it down, but Tincho just takes it with stride.
He's so funny. He is very humorous, and I love having him. A little sad. I wanted both of you guys to go through. In fact, in the projection simulated bracket that I was talking about a lot, I had you playing him in the top 8, but him as the group winner and you as the runner-up, and then it ended up being the other way around. But kind of speaking of which, I know you're really big into that, like data and like trying to map things out and go with statistics. Did this go according to how you thought it would, like either yourself or the rest of the top 8 or top 4?
No, I think things were too close to call. For Group B, ours was a little more set in stone, and I think Tincho had a fairly easy first opponent to go through because Lion King's lineup just matched up so poorly against us as well. But C and D were definitely a lot closer. Bloodyface in his group, I think, coming up made a lot of sense because his aggro lineup just did a lot of work in his field.
What do you think about the fact that 3 Americas players, and more specifically, no Europe players, got through to the top 4?
So Europe was dominant first time around, right? They had 3. Americas had 1. And now that we have 3, I think it adds up to us, North America, sending the most competitors to Worlds thus far. And numbers don't lie. NA's got to be the best region now.
Now we have our soundbite. We can wrap up the show.
He did it with such
a
calm...
says Europe sucks.
He did it with such a calm voice. He was just like, yeah, numbers don't lie.
People love how chill you are. And I think in general it's also contributed largely to how you've been able to be successful.
Yeah.
These days I feel like playing it cool is just the right line.
I had one more question.
Sure.
In one of your media pieces, you dabbed.
Oh.
With Frostmourne.
The
Lich King would be very proud
and
or offended.
I just want to point out that Frostmourne was...
It was real.
It was real. How much did that thing weigh?
It was a nice 65, 70-pound item.
Yeah, it's legit. You actually are fairly buff if you can hold that with one arm and dab.
He dabbed with a 65-pound sword and still qualified for Worlds. Most of the time when people dab, they lose the next
Oh,
match
you're right. Yeah,
immediately.
it's the dab curse because, you basically put a target on your back.
How far we've come. Hot Meowth dabbed on me in 2015. Now I get to dab back with Frostmourne.
Yeah, man. It all comes full circle. Stan, let's end this with a couple of lightning questions in a sense. So just answer whatever first comes to your head. What's your favorite deck in this current meta?
Death Heart 100. It's a lot of fun, and it's not super hard to play, so it's good for a ladder grind session.
Who's your favorite Saiyan?
Oh, Vegeta. Every time.
Oh.
You gotta root for the underdog.
Underdog, gotcha. Cool. Who's your favorite caster?
Everyone in this room.
Great answer.
Yeah!
All right, you can stay. Awesome. All right, so our next note is we want to talk about a specific game, now that Saiyan's here, and the reason why we want to is because the casters, with me and Brian Kibler, were fairly lost throughout this game because it's been a hot minute since we've seen Cube Warlock versus Taunt Druid for Redmen versus Language Hacker in the top 8. This was game 2, I believe, TJ. And just for people who did not get a chance to watch it, we are spoiling the results and what happened in that game. So pause this and go back and watch if you haven't already. That's the game of the tournament for me, largely because I felt like there was a lot of decision trees that could have had a different result. And more importantly, it had a surprise twist ending to wrap things up. So, TJ, I mean, you were the one who kind of compiled this note. So why do you want to specifically call out this game from your perspective?
Yeah. The gist of it is, in Taunt Druid versus Cube Warlock, Redman was put in a situation where there was a cube on his opponent's side of the board, and he Spirit Singer Umbra and then Faceless Manipulated the cube.
Hadronox is in this, by the way.
With Hadronox. So he summoned 2 Hadronoxes on his own side of the board. Up until that point, it seemed like his strategy was kind of to cube Doom Guards, get a bunch of Doom Guards, and have an explosive Blood River Gul'dan turn, and then try and win that way, by attrition in that regard. The big kind of decision trees came with drawing cards close to fatigue. I think Language Hacker realized that he needed to make a kind of tempo play. He needed to find cube so that he could Witching Hour cube and force a Godfrey and then reload and hope that Redman couldn't deal with it.
Right.
So it's hard to see at first, because drawing cards in that situation, I think you and Kibler both just kind of sat in silence and casting the match. You're like, he's drawing cards? And then a pause.
Zane, what do you think about that?
So the matchup, knowing the deck list, is like Language Hacker only has one Witching Hour to begin with.
Right.
So at first, it's hard to determine who is the aggressor in the matchup. Just kind of depending on how the first few turns play out, right? I think Renman started off with a lot of cube aggression, but once he figured out that the Doom Guards weren't going to get there, he had to switch to a defensive game plan. And that makes a lot of sense because Language Hacker only has the one Witching Hour. So I definitely liked when Renman went for the Umbra faceless play, just to make sure that he can win in the fatigue game plan. And it was really unfortunate because Language Hacker, I think, throughout the game, was not able to find Lich King early, because with the one key blind, you can just put up a big Voidwalker or Voidlord board, right? And that's fine going against 4/8s and 4/10s, 4/12s. But if your opponent is getting an extra Lich King card every turn, then that really forces you to change your game plan. So Language Hacker in the beginning has these big dragons that are okay, but they just kind of trade off the board and buys Renman a lot of time. But if the draw had panned out where he had Lich King in the port early on, then I think Language Hacker had a much better chance to win, despite only having one Witching Hour.
I think Shan put a really nice bow on it. Like, Language Hacker was kind of adapting to how his early game panned out, and then Redman did a great job just adjusting his game plan. And so I think that was the game of the tournament for me. However, that's not the well-played moment, TJ.
No.
The moment that we thought was the most well-played.
There it is.
Nice.
We brought the sign this week, Dan. We've forgotten it for so many weeks in a row.
Yeah, it's a nice visual element for all the people listening.
Yes.
For people who don't understand what TJ's referencing.
We have a sign that's an exact replica of the speech bubble that says well played.
That's right. Saiyan is here so he can help guide us and affirm whether or not we indeed picked the right moment, because we did have a little bit of identity crisis of whether or not the moment was well played. But when we have the Just Saiyan seal of approval, then I think we'll feel pretty good. So, why don't you go ahead and set this one up, TJ?
This was in game number 4 of the decider match to move on to the quarterfinals between Sai Miao and Moyen. It was Malagos Druid for Sai Miao, and Moyen was playing the Even Warlock. So up until this point, Sai Miao had been playing very defensively, just trying to stop the onslaught of giant threats from Moyen. Even going as far as to floop a death-gripped stubborn gastropod to keep himself from taking damage.
Yeah, this is really important because a lot of times Malagos Druids often pivot from their ultimate combo. They want to get Twig of the Will Tree, they want to assemble 20 mana in one turn, play Malagos, snap the Twig, play Flibinous Flute for another Malagos, and then just go to town with however much damage that they have. But a lot of times you have to, go for a different line. So another way that you can do that is once you have Flibinous Flip in your hand, you play Malagos and let your opponent kill it, and then you guarantee that you have a 4-mana Malagos to follow up with, let's say, Swipe, Double Moonfire, and then like a Hero Power or some kind. But that was thrown out the window because Tai Miao decided to play very defensively. So he's kind of forced into the Malagos all-in at that point in the game.
So then, once he realizes that, hey, I don't have any more options left, he's facing down a lot of pressure. He knows that Moyen Soul has a lot of threats. He has to try and, like you said, go for that all-in, one turn, take a risk style of play. And he does that by, one, he's faced with a board with quite a bit of damage on it, and he decides to draw with his Wrath because he realizes he's running out of time. He needs to stop playing defensive and draw Malagos ASAP instead of killing it off and taking damage off the board.
Yeah, so that in itself was very much needed because that was the only way he could win.
Yeah, and then almost the very next turn, he's faced with an opportunity where he has the damage in hand, and he plays Dream Total Forest to reduce the cost of Malagos, and is forced to play the Mind Control tech along with it, so that the Dream Total Forest guarantees the Malagos. And there's a 4/1 on board that could push through his 1/1 Scarab on the board and allow the damage to connect face, which there would be a few different outs that would kill him in that scenario if he does it. But instead, he decides to hold on to the Moonfire because the combo in his hand, if he doesn't hold on to the Moonfire, would not play around the additional healing that Moyen still had left in his deck. Because up till that point, he only played one Spellstone. No Shroombrewers, no second Spellstone. So he goes here and he takes the risk and says, I'm going to hold on to this damage in case you can heal out of range. I'm going to die to, what was it saying? Double Hellfire?
Double Hellfire, yeah.
Double Hellfire or a Death Coil as a Death Knight card, which is another read that Timeout had. Death Coil looked decent on the turn previously, so he had somewhat of a read that card was not Death Coil. And ends up being rewarded because Morian the next turn plays the Death Knight Gul'dan, and he still has plenty of damage by holding on that Moonfire.
Sam, what's your take on this well-played moment?
I think Timeout leading up to this well-played moment, he understood very well that his window was closing, right? The previous turns, he wanted to cycle cards out of his hand, make sure that he got close to this combo, because a lot of the pieces were already in his hand, and he just needed Malygos to finish everything off. And you can see, like, the turn of the well-played moment, his hand is actually just Mally, Moonfire, swipe, and a branching paths. So he was already low on resources, and he went for basically the one turn opportunity that he had to still maintain like a 30 damage combo. And time was running out, and Moyne didn't quite get there. I think he ended up being just 1 damage off, and Timeout just lands a very clutch victory there.
Yeah, the important takeaway from here is not like, oh, the Malygos draw off the top because you cycle the deck. It's actually understanding the limitations of what you can do and what your opponent can do. And the composure to hold on to the resources and focus on the big picture. Remember what we said, TJ, zoom out. Understand what's really important in this matchup as opposed to what's right in front of you. And he was able to take that perspective and win such a crucial game. And not only that, use it to win the series 3-2 because he was down 2-1 at that point with his last game or last potential game of the tournament. So that's why, in my opinion, TJ, it was well played. Let's wrap up this show with our final segment, and it's the return of one of TJ's favorite segments, Would You Buy This Deck? And we're going to change it up a little bit just for the sake of diversity. And we're going to start focusing on tournament decks that we've seen, which are a little bit wacky. And this one is quite possibly the one that lives up to its name the most. It is Hatul's Odd Warrior, emphasis on the odd. As there were some strange choices compared to the traditional lists, including 2 Frothing Berserkers, a Vicious Fleshling, and 2 Festerrook Hulks. For people who don't know what Festerrook Hulk does, it's a 5-mana 2/7 rare warrior card that says, after a friendly minion attacks, gain +1 attack.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a Gubarashi Berserker type thing where you have a 5-mana 2/7 that gains attack, except you have to make sure another friendly minion attacks so you can gain that +1 attack every single time.
He also had 2 cubes and 2 facelesses.
Right, and we saw that actually do work in his playoffs.
Yeah.
Right, specifically like the face manipulators and the Carnivorous Cube giving him extra value. But it's a really interesting take, and his logic was that Control Warrior, or Odd Warrior rather, is so good already at the aggro matchups that I'm really afraid of dying to the inevitable control matchups that I run into, like, say, a Deathstalker Rexar that I can't pressure against. So his logic was, I'm going to put in a lot more mid-ranging minions, like the Frothing Berserker, like the Festerrook Hulk, and extra greed to go over the top in those scenarios. And if he runs up against aggro, he's just going to tank up a lot. So let's go over to Just Saying. This deck is interesting, to say the least. And we want to toss the question, would you buy this deck? And if not, could we make any changes, maybe 1 or 2 cards at most, to make you buy this deck?
Well, at first glance, I wasn't terribly impressed by it, but throughout the tournament, I think Hatul got his warrior banned 3 times or so. So I think other competitors maybe saw this deck, played against it, and then realized, there's a good chance this deck is legitimate. I mean, picking up 3 bans, if you didn't have time and you're thinking, oh, it's just Odd Warrior, then maybe they would just ban it out of respect. But obviously we've had a lot of time to prep, so Trunks, who brought a full aggressive lineup, ended up banning the Warrior as well, as I believe, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like, at least in practice set's mind of Trunks, he felt like this was the right deck to ban. He felt that it was strong overall against his aggro lineup.
But sorry, Dan, in general, what are your thoughts behind bringing a deck that is meant to do a certain thing, but teching it against nearly the complete opposite? Why not just bring a different deck in the first place that's better against what else you expect? I guess it's a question of well-rounded or targeted lineups.
Well, I think Hatul had kind of played more towards his style.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of control decks that he enjoys playing and the ones that he's kind of mastered the most, he thought that it was better to tech his decks and still have that same playstyle intact in order to be more comfortable with his decks than trying to pivot a completely different way and play whole new archetypes for the championship.
So go back to the original question, Saiyan.
Would I buy this deck?
Yeah.
Would I buy this deck? Let's just say I might have a surprise up my sleeves for Orange County.
Ooh, I like that.
Whoa.
I like that. Leaving us in mystery.
Or just throwing everybody off.
Or just playing mind games with everyone who listens, because I do know a handful of competitive players watch this every week.
So, ultimately, Saiyan's answer to would he buy this deck is maybe.
Yep.
Stay tuned.
All right, so with this segment conclusion, we're going to have bonus meme time, TJ.
Bonus meme. Wait,
Yeah.
where's my pepper? Bonus meme.
What is going on? Is this what's like being admirable in this duo?
Yes.
Can't really expect or anticipate what TJ's going to say or do. So there's been a lot of buzz around top 10 lists.
Yeah.
Invin's been releasing one. I believe Cora did one on ESPN with Julie. People put Sane as one of the top players for 2018. I think no question. People usually include Hunter Ace, Muzzy, and a few other players as well. Has Season 2's conclusion here in the Fall Championship changed that up at all? For reference, there's the three that we mentioned. There's also Phenomeno. There's Sohyun. There's Seiko. There's Rivius. And, a handful of other people's in contention, too. Is there anybody that you think deserves to be in that top 10 that wasn't in that discussion before?
I actually put, which was in the article, I put Just Saying at number 1 on my panel.
Ooh.
And I'd made those before when Saiyan was about halfway in his run over the past couple months, maybe even earlier on.
Wow.
So kudos to me.
It's a lot of faith.
Yeah. I would keep Just Saying at number 1.
Right.
I think qualifying for the World Championship has kept him in that spot.
I don't think most people would contend with Just Saying. We're talking about the people who may have broken that ceiling to launch themselves in that conversation.
Yeah.
Has anybody done that? I can think of one name right now.
Which one?
And I'm going to pick my homeboy, Blood Trail. I think a lot of people haven't really been talking about him. And yes, he's had a very rocky beginning of the year. But I think, him putting together quite the campaign from Asia Pacific, we're kind of focusing on Rivius and to a certain extent Tyler, because he kind of had half his foot in EU, half his foot in the APAC region. But Blood Trail, I think, comes down top for APAC right now. I think his performances in back-to-back seasons, you got to put him as one of the top players for 2018.
If I had to pick a player, I'd pick Sinto. I think he proved that he can, even when he himself says he doesn't prep very much, that he's a player that could break into the top 10. I don't know who I'd replace him on that list with, because the list is pretty tight.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
It's very difficult. But I mean, you're just putting one more name into the hat.
Yeah.
How about you?
What about you, Saying?
I think the star power that really caught my eye throughout the championships was Moyen. Blood Trail, I think he's improving a lot, and he's improving at a pretty scary pace as well. So I definitely agree with the sentiment on Blood Trail. And along with that, I think a lot of the North American names like Bloody Face and Language Hacker, who came out on top, showed pretty exceptional play throughout the weekend as well. So there's a lot of eyes from championships that I just still keep an eye on.
Yeah. All right. Okay. And I will add one last name into the hat for a potential top 10 threat by the end of the year. And that is Monsanto, another Team Genji member. You pointed out Sinto. I'm going to go ahead and point to Monsanto. And I would say that Monsanto, if he can make his checkout time, or check-in time rather, is a top 10 threat. Monsanto, if he doesn't check in time, he's not getting there. But watch out. This guy also has some serious Hearthstone skills, and he's putting in the time.
Yeah.
That's about it for us today. I want to thank TJ for joining me as always, and Just Saying for taking out his precious time to join us. Saying, where are we going to find you next?
You'll see me at Orange County. I'm still going to all the tour stops. The grind never stops.
For myself, I will be casting Orange County Tour Stop, hosted by Esports Arena. Hope you guys are going to come out. I think Saying going to also be there as well. So come hang out with us. Come compete for some of those points, or just get your name out there in the Hearthstone map. TJ, wow, this is kind of the end of the string of daily, interactions with you. Where are we going to see you next?
Probably just on the next episode of TalkStone.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can find more episodes of TalkStone on twitch.tv/playhearthstone every other week at 6 p.m. Pacific, and the audio version on SoundCloud. If you want more Hearthstone esports news, analysis, and updates, check out playhearthstone.com/esports for all things Hearthstone. We'll see you next time in the chat.